Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Mac, and today we're talking about Farseer in Mythic Plus. If you caught the latest tuning pass, you already know Elemental got exactly one change, and it was something that I've been complaining about for months. Our grandmas and grandpas now benefit from the crit damage bonus on our Elemental Fury talent. I made a short video about this already, but I didn't go into much detail about what it actually meant. And after a bit more time, we learned that it didn't really change much, but it did make the Mythic Plus Farseer conversation at least worth having. Now let me be clear up front here so nobody clips me out of context. Stormbringer is still better, and it's still what you should be playing if you actually care about pushing the highest possible content in every form of content you might be playing in. This is not a Farseer is back video, but rather a Farseer isn't trolling your team anymore video. So if you want to know how to play it, stick around because I'm going to walk you through the entire thing for Mythic Plus with the build, the priority, the opener for both single target and AoE, and just the whole thing. But let's start off with why this matters, because the patch notes on their own kind of look like nothing. Before this, the Farseer ancestors, otherwise known, or what I prefer to call them, grandmas and grandpas, didn't scale with your crit damage increase from Elemental Fury, or your Apex talents for that matter. In practice, this meant your Farseer damage was dealing significantly less damage than you might initially think from reading the spec. But now they scale like everything else does, which is honestly how it should have worked from the start, but whatever, it's fixed now. Ultimately, this doesn't change anything in Raid. Farseer is still only ever used in Lightblight and Vanguards, and that's it. Although it is a little bit of a nice buff. But for Mythic Plus, it did take a build from something that was completely dead to something that's at least usable. It's still not as good as Stormbringer, and I want to be upfront about that. This change brings it closer, but it doesn't make it competitive. But usable is a big step up from where it was, so let's get into how you'd actually play it. The easiest way to think about this is to start with your Stormbringer M Plus build, and then accept that most of it's getting thrown out. The Stormbringer M Plus build is a Lightning Rod build, and Farseer build drops Lightning Rod entirely. We pretty much take Lightning Rod and Charge Conduit out completely, and then we move those points into Purging Flames and Crackling Fury. Purging Flames is the talent this build leans into the hardest, and I'll get into exactly why that matters in the AoE section in a moment. Crackling Fury reduces the cooldown of Voltaic Blaze, and with the Purging Flames talent, gives it a burst of AoE damage on top of it from there. From there, we keep the Elemental Core intact, because that's where Farseer single target lives. Fury of the Storms, Elemental Unity, and Everlasting Elements all stay in. But we do also grab Power of the Maelstrom, and the reason is for that free Elemental Blast. Every time you consume Power of the Maelstrom, you get a free Elemental Blast through Fusion of the Elements with the full stat buff included. And we get that because we're casting Lava Burst much more often in AoE in the Farseer build. And then lastly, we make two smaller swaps. We pull the point out of Swelling Maelstrom and drop it into Molten Wrath, which increases your Lava Burst damage, which is just good. And then we take the Aftershock Choice node and take Tectonic Collapse instead. That's the entire build over one of these sides of me. The headline here is there's no Lightning Rod and everything is pointed at Voltaic Blaze and Lava Burst. Alright, that's the build sorted. So before we get into actually pressing buttons, this is the part where I do the responsible content creator thing and mention my Patreon. I do elemental coaching over there, plus written breakdowns, rotation stuff, and anything for people who want to go a bit deeper than a YouTube video can really go. Anyways, plugs over, let's get into how to actually play this thing, starting with single target. Elemental Shaman as a whole generally doesn't have so much a rotation but a priority list, and Farseer is no different. Top to bottom, you just hit the highest thing available on that list, and that's pretty much the whole thing. At the top, we have your cooldowns. We have Stormkeeper, Ancestral Swiftness, and Ascendance all lined up together if you can do it. We want to make sure we keep our Flame Shock uptime at 100%. Flame Shock's really high up here for two main reasons, being the fact that Lava Burst only crits automatically when Flame Shock's on the target, and two, that 10% damage you get from Inferno Arc. Generally speaking, you want to refresh it within the pandemic window, which is about under 30% of its remaining duration, because if you reapply it within that window, you get full uptime without throwing away extra duration. The next priority after that is spending your Maelstrom, and your spender is Elemental Blast. Keep in mind here, you have a lower Maelstrom cap because of our build since we moved out of Swelling Maelstrom, so if you're used to pulling Maelstrom for Stormbringer, ease off a little bit or you'll overcap and waste generation without noticing. But after that, it's Lava Burst. In Stormbringer, you basically never hardcast Lava Burst, but the key here is, since we picked up Molten Wrath for Farseer, it actually hits pretty decently hard, and casting it consistently feeds Power of the Maelstrom. When you cast Lava Burst, you get a chance to proc Power of the Maelstrom, so you generally want to try to weave in Lightning Bolt in between your Lava Bursts to make sure you make the most out of that talent. If you don't, it's not a super big deal, but honestly, you just want to get used to the weaving of Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst, to maintain that same Master of the Elements feel, only this time it's not for Master of the Elements, it's just for Power of the Maelstrom. But then after all of that, we then use Lightning Bolt as filler for when nothing else is available, although, like I already said, you do want to weave in Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt to get the most out of Power of the Maelstrom. Now let's talk about the opener, which is effectively just a nice way of saying your Ascendance window. You always want to start with Stormkeeper. That buff that you're going to get with the 10% haste is always worth a lot more in your windows. After that, you're then going to send Elemental Blast if you got Maelstrom for it. Getting that stat buff rolling as fast as you possibly can is super important because the longer you have it during your burst window, just the more damage you're going to be doing. If you don't have the Maelstrom Elemental Blast, then just hit Ascendance. Once you're in your Ascendance window, you then use the Ancestral Swiftness to make your next cast instant, and then you pretty much just spend back into your normal rotation. Same concept applies as your normal rotation, Lava Burst weaving in between your lightning bolts to get the most out of the power of the Maelstrom talent. Really, it's a lot simpler than the Stormbringer Ascendance window. But now let's talk about the AoE priority, because it works similar, but there is one main difference here. At the top of the list, we send our cooldowns, Stormkeeper, Ancestral Swiftness, and Ascendance all lined up together if you can. No surprise there, that's just how classes work. But after that, you're going to talk about your Maelstrom spender, and this one depends on how many targets you're actually hitting. Anything under 4 targets, you're just still spending Elemental Blast. At those low counts, its damage plus the stat buff just is worth more than spreading those Earthquakes. At 4 or more, you then just swap to Earthquake. Next priority is actually Lava Burst, but specifically when you have the Purging Flames buff up. And ideally if you have a Lava Surge proc. This is what the whole AoE build is built around, so let me explain it here. Voltaic Blaze applies Flame Shock across the pack and primes a Purging Flames buff. With that buff up, your next Lava Burst detonates across every Flame Shock target at once, and that Molten Wrath talent is buffing every single one of those. So when your Purging Flames is up, Lava Burst becomes one of the biggest things you can press, which is why it's so high on the list here. Below that, it's Voltaic Blaze on cooldown, because Voltaic Blaze is what hands you that Purging Flames buff in the first place. And at the bottom of your list, it's Chain Lightning as your filler. Now to clarify here, you only cast Lava Burst in AoE when you are under 3 targets, or when you have your Purging Flames buff available. So you're still kind of following the idea of you never want to really hit Lava Burst in AoE. The only real caveat to that, and really the real detail and gimmick of Farseer, is that Purging Flames buff. If you use Voltaic Blaze on cooldown, you'll get more AoE meatballs, and that is the entire gimmick of this hero talent. Ultimately, it's an incredibly simplistic rotation, and the most important thing you can do here is spending your Voltaic Blaze as efficiently as possible. But now let's talk about the AoE opener, because it's a little bit different. One thing to understand is that Ascendance and Voltaic Blaze combo are 2 completely separate sources of AoE Lava Bursts. When you cast Ascendance, it auto-applies Flame Shock and fires Lava Burst to every Flame Shock target. Voltaic Blaze with Purging Flame also has its own separate instance of that, where it applies Flame Shock and sets up its own round of Lava Burst at every Flame Shock target as well. But the opener does matter here slightly, so you get the most out of it. Firstly, like everything else we've done, Stormkeeper first before anything. Then we press Voltaic Blaze, which applies our Flame Shock to the pack and primes our Purging Flames buff. At this point, we hold our Lava Burst because we want it to be buffed by our Ascendance, so we don't click that. We instead cast Elemental Blast if you have the Maelstrom for it, to give you that stat buff, rolling into everything else. If you can't cast Elemental Blast, or after you cast Elemental Blast, you then cast Ascendance. That is your first wave that sends meatballs everywhere, and now you're inside that window where your overloads are all cranked up, with the Elemental Blast buff, hopefully. Then you Ancestral Swiftness, and you spend it on that Lava Burst you've been holding. That Lava Burst then detonates into the Purging Flames buff you primed earlier before your Ascendance, and that is a second wave of meatballs, except this one is going out inside your Ascendance, so they're all getting buffed on top of it. And from there, then you just follow it with your normal priority. Ultimately, it's not as difficult as the Stormbringer Ascendance window, but it does have its own nuance, so make sure to follow that if you can. But that's pretty much it, so where does it leave Farseer? It's still behind Stormbringer and Mythic Plus, that much hasn't changed. But it went from being completely dead in the water to genuinely fine for a chill key. It's ultimately not going to shake up the meta, and I'm definitely not telling you to swap. But if you want to mess around with it, or you just like that playstyle, you're no longer trolling your group by bringing it instead. If this helped you out, drop a like on the video, it really does help the channel out a lot. And subscribe if you want more Elemental or WoW content, I've got plenty more coming your way. Also, I've been streaming over on Twitch every now and again, so if you want to hang out, ask questions, or just watch Raider Keys, feel free to stop by. And if you want to support the channel a bit more directly, I've got a Patreon linked below where I offer coaching and additional content, along with a Discord where you can talk about the spec, ask questions, or just hang out with the community. But yeah, that's all I got for this one, so thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I will see you in the next one.